I'm very happy to be joined by Dermot Corrigan, who covers La Liga and Spanish football for The Athletic. And before we move on to James Rodriguez, it's been a very turbulent time for Spanish football over the past few weeks. How have you found it, Dermot, and what's it been like?
Yeah, it's been quite exciting. This is not the first time I said this, but I was hoping a little bit that with the Spanish teams getting out of the Champions League and not that much money around for big name signings this summer, that it might be quiet enough a couple of weeks leading up to the start of the season. But it hasn't turned out that way. It's been fun. It's exciting when big stuff is happening. It's exciting, and Messi saying he's going to leave Barca is about as big as it gets. Kind of, I said this as well in other places. It's a little bit sad that to see the relationship between Messi and Barcelona break down like that is not so much fun. But got to speak to a lot of interesting people, got to write some interesting stories as well about it. So it's been an exciting few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, from such a unfortunate situation, obviously for people like yourself, opportunities will definitely arise. But firstly, this being from an Everton perspective, for grand old team, Colombian international James Rodriguez was officially announced as an Everton player. Now, this is a player that seemingly, ever since he scored that wonder goal against Uruguay as a 22-year-old at the 2014 World Cup, seems to be linked with a move to the Premier League. Even before that, maybe, I remember watching him when he was at Porto with the likes of Falcao and Hulk, and the success that he had there. I don't mind saying this, it can come from a place of honesty, but it is quite surprising to see a player of such, high stature and high profile join a team off the back of finishing 12th. Obviously Everton have been underperforming, and this being Carlo Ancelotti's upcoming first full season in charge of the club, the project, as you seem to look to pick up steam a little bit, and seems a lot more of an attractive proposition for potential new players. And I'd just like to ask, obviously, them as somebody based in Madrid, I guess you could give a real interesting perspective. What were your initial thoughts on the move?
Yeah, I was surprised, I guess, that initially when you think that James was going to move on, like over the last couple of years when it's become kind of clear that he didn't fit into Zidane's plans, the teams that he have been linked with have all been, teams who play in the Champions League regularly at that kind of level. Maybe not to go to PSG or to go to Man City at this stage in his career, but it wouldn't have surprised me if he'd have moved to Manchester United or to Inter Milan or somebody like that. And Everton, historically are such a big club and everything, but in recent years they haven't been punching on that level. But it shows, I guess, first by being able to attract Carlo Ancelotti as the coach, that opens up a whole new level of possibilities to bring in players who will be attracted to work with a coach like Carlo. And James, because he's worked with him at two clubs before, it makes a certain amount of sense that given Everton have the money now, given that they have Ancelotti, and given that James was looking for a way out of Madrid, or has been looking for a new challenge, or even just a place to play regularly, that it ended up fitting pretty well, really.
Yeah, most definitely. And in that first season with Real Madrid in particular, the 14-15 season, he turned in a really impressive 13 goals and 13 assists in La Liga. James himself has paid compliments to Ancelotti, saying that there's a mutual trust between the pair, and he believes that Carlo is a manager that knows how to get the best out of him. Obviously, at Real Madrid, he's surrounded by world-class players, Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Toni Kroos. But can you speak to how Ancelotti managed to get the best out of him, particularly within that first season?
It's definitely true that when he came into the team, he had all these guys around him, Ronaldo, Bale, he was competing with these people for a place in the team. But James seemed to have, coming off the World Cup, he seemed to have the confidence that he could, he was worth a place in that team, or he was on the same level as these guys. And he did show it. He scored some amazing goals, set up some assists, and he was automatically on the same wavelength. Some players come to Madrid. Luka Jovic is maybe a decent example of somebody who isn't sure where to run, or doesn't have the confidence to play a 1-2 with Kroos. It's almost like he's wondering, whether he's good enough to be with these guys, or he doesn't feel that he he fits with them. But James didn't have that problem at all. That from day one came in, scored on his debut. I think scored in the Supercopa against Atletico, which helped as well. A bit of a scruffy goal, but it got him off the mark. And Ancelotti was perfect for that situation because he could keep James' confidence at a high level. The team wasn't super tactically set up in a way that he was asking James to do a lot of extra work off the ball or to fulfill, huge detailed tactical instructions. Madrid were on a roll at that stage as well. They just won the Champions League for the first time in a long time. Everybody was super confident, and that was maybe the best Madrid team of my time covering them. Just to watch, played some amazing football, scored a lot of goals, scored a lot of great goals, and even sometimes you had a feeling that they were winning games 4 or 5-0, and the players on the pitch were kind of battling each other in order to score the best goal. Whether it was Ronaldo would hit one in the top corner from outside the box, and then James would try something even more spectacular later in the game, and often it came off. Things just seemed to click for them, especially during the first 6 months of that season, and that was, for James, that was the highlight of his time in Madrid for sure.
Yeah, and I think to address the concerns that some people may have, there tends to be a blanket statement almost generally by rival fans, Liverpool and whatnot, that he hasn't been very good for, the past 6 years. There is a notable decline in his turning in terms of stats until he rejoins with Carlo Ancelotti for that 2-year loan spell at Bayern Munich. I think it was 7 goals and 11 assists in 17-18, and 7 goals and 4 assists in 18-19. Obviously, there is the turnover of manager. I think Rafa Benitez is in there as well before Zidane comes in.
Sure.
But could you detail and make clear for some Evertonians just where James' struggles began, which ultimately I would say led to his departure from Madrid?
Yeah, it is he did fall down from that state of grace almost he was in his first couple of months. It was a fairly steady fall. But the first problem for him was that there was so many other great players in the team, and it was never sure exactly where he fitted into them. When things were on a roll and the team were doing really well and they were scoring 4 or 5 goals every game or almost every game, it didn't matter so much. But when they started to seize up a bit in games and they started to drop points and lose things, you looked at the team and you weren't sure where James was going to play. He didn't really fit into the 3-man midfield, which Ancelotti liked to have. Like Di Maria was there before, and he was somebody who had maybe physically was able to cover more ground, got his foot in it a little bit more as well than James. And then in the front three, you had Bale, Benzema, and Cristiano Ronaldo, and it was very difficult to move any of them out. So whenever James did play, he tended to do okay. He tended to keep scoring goals. I think it's true that his numbers dropped off, but per minute it didn't drop off quite as badly. It was just that he wasn't in the team as much as he would have wanted. And Rafa came in, and Rafa had his own. James wouldn't be an ideal Rafa player. I think it's fair to say. People who follow Rafa Benitez's career, he prefers guys who will follow pretty detailed instructions and who fulfill a tactical job for the team. There wasn't. Maybe he tried to play him a little bit as a number 10 in the team as well, a little bit, but again, just didn't fit for him. Zidane came in then, and one of Zidane's maybe most surprising moves was to move Casemiro, who under Benitez hadn't played that much, was to bring Casemiro into the team as an automatic starter, and that cut down the chances for James even more to play in the team. So bit by bit, he was being pushed out to the side, more for tactical reasons than for anything wrong that he had done himself. He had a couple of niggling injuries as well that didn't help. And along the way, he maybe got a little bit frustrated with the situation because he's quite a prickly, stubborn type of character. He's come a long way very fast in his career up until the point that he joined Real Madrid, and it was harder for him to accept that he wasn't, the main man in the team or that everybody wasn't looking to him. And he was scoring goals quite often when he did play, but not that he got the hump completely, but just that he didn't have the same confidence. That he wasn't gliding the way he had been through his first 6 months or so. And as time went on, there was kind of a wear and tear involved in that. And everybody when he came into the team, he did less well. Coach was kind of going, okay, well, we gave you a chance, it didn't work out. But in the end, himself and Zidane, it's fair to say they didn't really see eye to eye.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point that you do raise about the potential clash of personalities. Now, I I wouldn't dream of bashing Zinedine Zidane. He was one of my favourite players to watch growing up. When Real Madrid completed that historic back-to-back of Champions Leagues, obviously Carlo won one, but Zidane was the man to come in and win the other two. Would it be fair to say that Zidane, you pointed out a really good fact there in that, that tactical factor of including Casemiro. Would you say that Zidane classified James as a luxury player?
It's a weird one with Zidane because, I loved him watching him as a player as well, and remember him in some of the individual performances that he put in huge games. And he was not quite a luxury player, but he was somebody who himself didn't fit into such a strict system in the team, even in the France team, or that he did so well. And he never had a set position really in that team. Maybe he drifted in a bit from the left. The rest of the team was set up quite structurally, maybe to suit him as well in a way. And as a coach, he's somebody who doesn't want to have to change things too much. Cristiano Ronaldo is a case on his own. If Ronaldo scoring a goal a game, then the rest of the team are just going to have to put up with it. But other players, whether it's Bale, Isco, James, even Dani Ceballos as well, is somebody who very good player, but just wasn't able to fit within Zidane's system. And Zidane has gone from being somebody who was such an individualist as a player to being a real systems guy or a structure guy as a coach, which is maybe a bit of a surprise, but it does explain why it was more difficult for James to fit within that structure that Zidane had in mind for the team, with Casemiro as that, holder. Then you've got Kroos and Modric either side. Then you've got the three big guys up front. And, James wasn't a like-for-like replacement for either of them. So when he did come in, he was kind of playing a little bit out of position, not in his favourite role. And, that didn't go for him at all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point as well. I genuinely do feel like, up until as of late, really, I feel like that partnership of Kroos and Modric was the best in the world in terms of central midfield partnerships. And just to touch on the tactical aspects of things now, obviously, I don't know if you'll know in depth, obviously, but I'm sure you've heard of the news of the recent recruitment of Everton, in that we brought in Alan from Napoli, and yesterday finally confirmed Abdoulaye Doucouré from Watford. For me, I feel like one of Carlo Ancelotti's biggest accomplishments in the short time at the club so far was that he finally nailed down a formation that the team seemed to operate well within. Obviously, we've gone about sticking Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison up as a front two, and we've stabilised in a 4-4-2 formation. And I feel like, the major issues being the midfield, that's sort of risen to the top. Now, you did touch on that a little bit earlier, in that James, when at Madrid, ended up playing slightly out of position. If I'm right in saying he was often sort of on the right side of the attack, and just sort of, really struggled to fit in. What do you expect tactically for, him joining up with Everton? Do you think he'll be the star man?
That is quite interesting, the way you put it there. And from the bits I saw of Everton last year, that 4-4-2 did seem quite solid, and Ancelotti made a big bet on that. I'd wonder if that was because, as you say, it was to fit the players that he had at that stage. He didn't have that many central midfielders who could do a job for him, even putting different people in there who it wasn't maybe their primary role or where they're used to playing. Looking completely from the outside, you'd expect him to change the system with the new guys who he has signed. It would make more sense to me to move to something like a 4-2-3-1 and to play James as kind of number 10 in that system, because that would be ideal for James. I would imagine that's where he played for Colombia. That's what worked out so well for him, and it would allow, with either the new signings or if Andre Gomez or whoever else plays in the centre of the midfield, that those guys' job will be to do a lot of the running to provide this structural platform on which James can then go about deciding games on his own. Because if you are set up fairly solidly, and you have him and then maybe other guys coming in from wide, again, I've seen more of Everton's attackers who'd be more likely to play in those roles. But if you had pacey guys coming from wide, and if you had somebody to play off, a centre forward that James could play off, then that would be the best way to get the best out of James from what I've seen of him over his career.
Yeah, that's a fair shout, and I would say with the with the attention that this move has attracted, I I wouldn't go far wrong in saying that he will become the main man within the starting 11 in terms of attack and creation. Um, I don't know if you've seen recently, but the club obviously they've done a great job at marketing the move, and they provided a lot of content on James in such a short space of time. They recently put up his first training session with the team, and as part of the clip, he scores an overhead kick, and his Colombian teammate Yerry Mina is just going absolutely mad with excitement in the background for that. And what I wanted to ask is, obviously, as I said, this is a player that seemingly for so many years now has been linked to a move to the Premier League to see whether or not he can do it in England. Uh, do you think the acclimatization period will take long? And what deal of patience do you think Evertonians will have to have with James? Because I'm not quite sure if he'll be match fit given the limited time that he had with Madrid in his last season.
Yeah, like for sure he is unlikely to come in and hit the ground running, really, as you say, because he hasn't played so much over the last year or so. I think personality wise, I wouldn't expect it to be a big problem for him. I know just from different stuff done about him before that, he moved around a lot as a kid. He didn't have the easiest of upbringings. Moved to Argentina, to Buenos Aires when he was very young. Come through some quite difficult personal experiences. He's used to kind of moving around and finding a new home in different places. And as you say, he has Yerry Mina there as well, who should be able to help him out. You'd imagine there's good at Everton. There's a decent amount of Brazilian, South Americans who will be able to, you'd imagine, to help him to settle in. The style of football, this is something that is a bit of a bugbear of mine, that when people say, he's only played in La Liga, how's he going to handle, playing in the Premier League? Like there are some quite physical teams in La Liga too, and it does get pretty tough. And James, one of the things about him is that he's not a super athlete. I guess it's fair to say. He's a technical player, and he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, but he is quite tough. And even in that World Cup, when he played his best, he was getting kicked by Uruguayans, getting kicked by the Brazilians as well. And he's a very stubborn, strong kind of mentality guy. So that if he's in the right frame of mind that he wants to go out and produce for Everton, I don't think like getting kicked or it being a rainy day or whatever is going to stop him from hurting the other team. Even if they kick him, then he's more likely to do something. I think that's the kind of guy that he is, assuming everything else in his life is good and he's settled and he's happy and he's motivated to produce for the team. I don't think it will be a case of, sometimes if players do move to a new club, whether it's in England or in Spain, that, just doesn't work for them or whatever. You never know with a guy, but, my feeling on James will be that once he gets himself match fit and his sharpness up again, playing games regularly, that he should be good to go.
That's really good to hear, and I'm sure Evertonians will, really be excited of the fact that, he has got that tenacity about him. And if I'm not wrong, from my time of watching, obviously the Colombian national team, they do know how to give it out themselves.
Yeah,
in terms of their physicality. Just to sort of look at wrapping up the Everton segment of the podcast now. As you said, you touched on it there. You feel like the right way to go about it structurally is to put these players around them. I imagine, obviously, with the new recruits, Alan and Decore, two physical players that shoulder more defensive responsibility. Do you feel like that is the right way to go?
It's hard to know. It would depend on what his physical fitness is like and how sharp he gets going. So if again, yeah, you guys might have a better idea of that from watching him train or from seeing when he starts to play, if he gets a run in any preseason games or ahead of what he's not going to at this stage. But when he starts to come in and play for the team, he has said, since he joined, that he's really looking forward to playing with Ancelotti and that his motivation levels are going to be high. And if that is the case, which maybe a little bit at Madrid and at Bayern, it wasn't always, maybe that his mind wandered a little bit, but assuming he is fully focused and really up for giving his all for Everton, then I'd expect him to start scoring goals quite quickly. the team have a couple of very good new signings who appear to fit with him. As you say, they're two guys who can come in and do it. It's going to be difficult with three key members of the team who are all kind of settling in. So maybe some of the other players, Andre Gomez might get a run as well, somebody who I know a little bit from seeing here in La Liga, and is a very good player as well. But trying to predict how many goals he's going to score, how many assists he's going to give is difficult. But I'd expect him to settle in quite quickly, and once he gets his first goal, or once it seems that he's happy at Everton, then I expect more to follow.
Most definitely. That's great to hear, and I know Evertonians are really excited to see James Rodriguez play football at Goodison Park. To push on to more of a career-orientated side of things, I mentioned to you just before we started recording, Dermot, that I have just graduated. I mean, we're still I picked the wrong year to graduate, but I've just finished my 3 years at the university campus of football and business. I've done a degree in business and media. Cool. And to see someone like yourself, obviously, Irish and, from around these parts, so to say, to take on the challenges such as going to Spain and embracing Spanish culture, I do find it really, really intriguing. So if you wouldn't mind, and if it's okay, could you just sort of detail how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah. It definitely wasn't a set career plan that I had in mind to end up doing this. I studied communications in Dublin back at the end of the 1990s. For personal reasons, ended up coming to Spain. And I'd always been a writer or a journalist. I'd written about all kinds of different things, from like film reviews to property stuff to business stuff, technology. And my first couple of years in Spain, I continued to do that for Irish newspapers, to write about computers, technology, business, that kind of stuff remotely. Sometimes not letting on that I was in Spain while I was writing for the Irish papers. Then I made just a bit of a plan to see would it go, because I'd always loved football. I'd always been really interested in football and Spanish football as well, and started to write for When Saturday Comes was the first football magazine that I wrote for, and then got a really good break with Sport 360, a website based out of Dubai, who were looking for a Spanish football correspondent. So that was the first kind of full-time job that I had. So I had to kind of knock some of the other stuff on the head, and it wasn't super paid. It was very good. They gave me a lot of opportunities, but it was taking a bit of a risk at that stage. But it got me into to go to the games, which was the main thing, to start to go to the Bernabeu or the Camp Nou, and to follow the games day to day. At the same time, that was when there was super amount of interest in Spanish football, in Mourinho, Guardiola, Ronaldo against Messi. It was right at the top when the Clásico was bigger than it is today. In fairness, it was huge at that stage. And as a freelancer based in Spain, it was easier to sell football stories than it was to try to write about Spanish movies or anything else really that people wanted to know all about football. So that's how I got the break, and then from there a couple of other breaks along the way, and ended up with the Athletic today.
That's cool. That's really interesting to hear that. Obviously you didn't necessarily start off specializing within football, but due to your passion, as I feel like that just seems to be the thing within the sports industry. For those that work within it, there is just an undying passion for football. Talking about Spanish football in particular, I mean, as I say, I mentioned to you off camera that I grew up. I mean, I'm probably, I'd say I fancy German football a bit more in terms of its supporter-orientated ethos, if you know what I mean, just in terms of how community-centred German football is. But without a doubt, my first love was Spanish football. I was very blessed and fortunate enough to be able to go to the Camp Nou a few times as a kid and get to watch, in particular, the 2006 Barcelona team. So players such as Carlos Puyol, Samuel Eto'o, who eventually ended up playing to Everton, which I still find mind-blowing to this day. A very young Lionel Messi. I'm one of the few who can say I've got to see him live several times. Deco, the list just goes on and on of the absolutely world-class talent that was available within La Liga during that time. So just in regards to Spanish football, what is it that appeals to you so much?
Yeah, like for me, it was amazing when I started off to go to see Messi live, or to be in the Bernabeu, and for that to be your desk and stick your computer down and start typing away was pretty surreal. But I first really got into Spanish football more from fans' point of view. Like I had some close friends who were supporters of Betis as well at that stage, and there was a big fans protest going on against the president at that stage, and I kind of got a bit swept up in that. The political action, I wasn't out protesting that much myself, but there was a social end to it. You go along, you go on the march, you meet new people, you get to head out afterwards and have a few drinks and talk about football, and that was kind of how I ended up having a bit of a liking for Betis as well. And within Spanish football, there's so many other stories as well, like Athletic Bilbao or Barcelona, like Bilbao with the Basconitas, Barcelona and their Catalans, even teams like Cadiz who just got promoted have, they're really unique. And I guess, German football has that as well, and Italian football has that as well. But I had a personal connection to Spain. I'm set up here now with Spanish wife and two kids. And, apart from it being great to watch Messi, and that has been, an experience amazingly, or to watch a Pep Guardiola team and to get the chance to write about it has been fantastic. But also to get to know people who just love their club and to learn so much about Spain, the country, through football has been, for me, maybe even more important than, watching Messi score another wonderful goal, even though that is pretty special as well.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And from a media perspective, I always find it very interesting to hear from, foreign journalists or people covering sports within different countries. What would you say the biggest differences are between the British and Irish press in comparison to the Spanish media?
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest difference is the fact that there is, dedicated sports papers, where in England it's a section of the main paper. Like you have Aston Marca in Madrid, or Mundo Deportivo and Sport in Barcelona. Even Seville, you've got Estadio Deportivo. In Valencia, Super Deporte. Every big city has, or the biggest of the cities all have their own dedicated sports papers, which means they're super close to the club. You've got reporters whose whole job it is to embed yourself almost in Real Madrid or in Barcelona and find out stories and write about what's going on there, which I guess is a little bit different from how things work in England, even though, obviously there are Manchester United or Everton correspondents who are big into it as well, but it's just kind of different when it's your own paper. The other thing that I found really interesting about Spain was the radio shows at night. Like on each night from like 11 o'clock at night until like 1 in the morning, like 7 days a week, there's 3 different live radio shows which are just filled with sports, and most of it is football. If there's a big basketball story, they'll cover it, or Formula One, they'll cover it, but often it's just football. And personally, that was really good way of learning Spanish for a start. Like I used to listen to it all the time and read the papers all the time as well, but just, the podcasts of the big shows, El Larguero or El Transistores in your one now, are like really interesting to learn more from a professional point of view for me, but also just to see how Spanish media works and how Spanish culture works and stuff like that. So that's, again, not saying that there's no radio shows in England, but just the sheer amount of radio time and what a central part it holds in Spanish culture as well. Like these are the most listened to radio shows of all. Like El Larguero is like an institution in Spain, and everybody knows the host. Was a big, huge deal. Slightly off topic this, but there was a huge deal a couple of years ago when one radio station stole the host of another radio station, like of their late night football chat show, and it was like a huge big deal. Everybody had an opinion on it. People were like, is he being betrayed? People were talking about it was going to cost them like €1 million in order to take this guy and his producers. And like you see the adverts on, if you're going down the motorway, sometimes there'll be like an ad for this radio show, and it'll show, instead of being like Messi on the poster, it's going to be like this radio host who like, but they're part of the culture, and they have, like, Florentino Perez comes on the show, not all the time, but these are, this guy knows Florentino Perez, you know what I mean? Whereas in England, maybe I'm wrong because, I've never lived in England, but in Ireland there's lots of really good radio shows, but they don't have this, they're not quite as connected either to the industry or just to the general culture as they are in Spain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And would you say embedding yourself in Spanish culture in that sense, listening to radio shows. I know you say generally a print journalist. Would you say that really helped with learning Spanish and the language barrier?
Yeah, for sure. It helped me a lot. It still is in, like, my Spanish is it's pretty good now. I've been here 10 years, but I still speak with a foreign accent, and my vocabulary is still that of a foreigner. And I know a lot of words which are come out of football. So and in football they might have a slightly different meaning than they would in normal life. So I'll end up using a word which I'm pretty sure I know what it means and I can spell it and everything, but it gets a couple of giggles maybe from the father-in-law or whatever when you bring it up in conversation. So it's been super useful, and like embedding, being here makes such a big difference just to understand how things go. I've in a little way lost touch with Irish sports or English sports, because when you're not in the country, it's more difficult to follow day to day what's going on. Being here is such a huge advantage professionally if you wanted to write about Spanish football.
Yeah, definitely. And something for me that I find particularly interesting is obviously as originally a print based journalist, there's been a real sort of revolution in terms of the media. You talked about the radio shows and their popularity within Spain, and I suppose the way technology is advanced, the sort of updated version of that, I would say, is there are examples of like podcasts and such things. So obviously now in your role at the Athletic, obviously when the Athletic really seems to grip British football and football as a whole, obviously I think isn't it American based or originally American company. So how have you found that sort of the shift in the business model?
Yeah, it's been weird. Like I have to say, the Athletic has been it's a super place to work. It's a new experience for me as well, because I've always been or up until I joined the Athletic, I was always freelance. So I wrote for different people. Even I spent a good bit of time writing for ESPN, but at the same time I'd write magazine articles for people, or kept in touch with the Irish Examiner newspaper. I'd write for them as well from time to time. Whereas with the Athletic, you're more part of a team. I was always just a freelancer who could come and go in a way, whereas there's a real good, there's more contact involved, there's maybe a little bit more work involved as well, but there is a sense that you're part of something bigger, that people help each other out. There's a lot of teamwork goes on, a lot of articles that have 3 or 4 names on it, because 3 or 4 or even more people have been working hard on it. Or even the guys who write about Everton, Greg and Paddy, if they're doing something about James, for instance, they'll give me a shout and I'll try and give them a dig out if I can. Or if Madrid are interested in signing a player from Everton, I get onto them and see, what's the story from your end, or how can you help me out with this? So that's been great. That's been really good. It's a little like, because it's behind the paywall, maybe not so many people are able to read it, which is true as well. But you get it. The people who do read it tend to be, really or more knowledgeable, I think it's fair to say, about what they're doing. The people who've made a bit of an investment in what they're doing. So, that they really want to read it. They want to find out more, and comments and that have generally been positive. So it's been a weird time to start in a new company with pandemic, and still haven't been to, with the Athletic, over 6 months, but still haven't been to an actual stadium to cover a game for them. But it's been it's been good. It's been really good.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. I was going to say, how have you found the pandemic over these last couple of months in Spain?
It's tough. Like, it's been tough. Personally, and that it's been tough. Professionally, it's been strange starting out when there was no games on with the Athletic. Was a bit weird, but it also gave a little bit of an opportunity to write about more interesting things, because you weren't tied to a match every Saturday, a match every Wednesday. You could spend a bit more time writing 4,000 words about Athletic Bilbao's unique history and philosophy and all that. So that was kind of good. Would be great for it to be over. I know it's probably not anytime soon, but it has affected football quite a lot, and it's affected all of us in different ways. So it's been not ideal, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, no, well, hopefully, obviously football is looking to return to some sense of normality soon, and fingers crossed that will be the case for supporters and those working within the industry. You touched on it there. I find it really interesting that You spent time as a freelancer, and obviously, you talked a little bit about it there, working within a really uncertain environment. Have you got any tips or advice for those who are having to go into working freelance at the moment?
For sure, I know it's very difficult. Like having it join the Liga is very fortunate for me, and I feel for some people who are freelancing, and it is more difficult to do it at the moment. You got to do really good work. Is the easy thing to say, but that's part of it. That you have to kind of stand out from everybody else and pick something that's a little bit different from what other people are doing. Like, it is good to get as much exposure as you can, and to whether that is to be really active on Twitter, or whether you're writing for if it's a blog, or maybe people who don't pay you that much for what you're going to do. But I've been just very lucky, so I can be quite wary about giving out lots of advice to people, but just trying to find things that nobody else is writing about, or things that the people are going to read, or the editors are going to like, but that hasn't been pitched to them before, or that they've never heard of before, is the best way to grab people's attention, I think. Like the Messi 6 best goals over his Barcelona career, it could be a really interesting story, and you might do it really, really well, but you're competing against a lot of other people who've done it before, and people other people with lots of resources to spend lots of time looking back over all of his goals. But if you can interview somebody who was there the first time Messi scored, or just try and come up with a different way of looking at things, or come at it from a different angle, that's the best way to grab somebody's attention. Because I know, like, editors get a lot of pitches all the time, and when I was freelance, I'd have decent relationships with some editors, but their budgets were being cut, and it was hard for them to give you work, even if they wanted to, if it didn't really stand out. So it makes it harder to try to come up with those ideas. Is not as easy, but if you can manage to do it, then it's the best way to get into it, I think.
Certainly. I really appreciate the advice, and I just want to say, Dermot, thanks very much for your time, and if there's ever anything in the future in regard to the podcast, you're more than welcome to come on and talk about things. So I just want to say thanks again for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Cool, cheers. Enjoy the match. Thanks.